pushed our broadcast out to Facebook. I'm getting a notification that we are streaming live now, so welcome everybody. We are excited to have both Nathan Campbell and Richard Hricik here tonight to talk to you about some issues tonight. We are going to cover 3 topics this evening: education, equality, and the environment. So we want to jump right in now that we are streaming live, and we'll start with Nathan. Nathan, do you want to tell us a little bit about your education platform and what your ideas are for South Carolina Senate?
So, hi, my name is Nathan Campbell. I am the candidate for South Carolina State Senate 46. District 46 is made up of Hilton Head, Bluffton.
Facebook, I'm getting a notification.
Bluffton, Beaufort, and parts of Jasper County. And one of the things that obviously is very important to me is because my day job happens to be, I am a current high school teacher. I teach high school government at May River High School. I also run some of the programming there. I'm the AP testing coordinator. So I have a lot of hats that I wear that a lot of us teachers are relearning this first week because we just went back on Monday. So obviously education is a huge issue for me, because of what's going on in South Carolina and what has gone on in South Carolina. When we look at South Carolina's education policies, we've really been lacking behind the rest of the country when it comes to equity, when it comes to funding, and when it comes to teacher retention and recruitment. And so when we look at those 3 areas, I really think that I'm poised to be able to kind of attack these areas on day one if elected, get in there, work with the Senate Education Committee, and actually spit out good legislation that I think we can work through both sides. But again, this is electing people that are important, that value education, like most of the candidates on the Democratic side. And when you talk to people like Richard and I, you're going to see that education is something that we value. Well, when I grew up in West Virginia, and I grew up in a very small county. We only had 1 stoplight. We had 1 high school in the whole county, and we valued education to be that way out from that small town to go off to college, because that was the push in the pendulum. And I'll talk about that here when I talk about education, because I think what's happened is, when I was kind of pushed to college, a lot of kids, almost all kids, were giving that push to college. And what we see now, and what we're really good at in our area, meaning May River High School, is that we have CATE programs that these kids can develop skills that, again, are getting professional degrees, getting them high paid jobs right out of high school at the age of 18. They're not incurring some of that debt that is happening among a lot of our current kids that are going off to college. And that debt crisis is going to be something that you're going to hear a lot from the national level. But from the state level, when we look at these reforms, we really have an opportunity, because what they've said in the last few days is, hey, we're not going to take up an education bill this year. We're going to talk about some education issues. If we pass it, they're not going to pass anything to my knowledge. So we're going to have to be able to fight for these things. When we get hopefully, if we flip my seat, it'll be a Democratic state Senate majority. If we get that state Senate majority, we're going to have an upper hand in the negotiation process, where we didn't have a hand at the table last time. So really getting in there and being able to look at, hey, teacher retention is more than just throwing money at teachers and saying, hey, we're going to bring up base salary, and hey, we'll add 6 more years to it. So when we look at real education reform, some of these things are going to have to go into that funding formula. And this isn't a 1 or 2 year fix. So the people like me have to be in it for the long haul, in that education over the next 4 to 8 years can really be an engine and a motivator for things when we talk about the economy, when we talk about trying to build South Carolina and building some and being an attractive option to bring industry into South Carolina. We had some exciting news today when we talk about Kate Education out in Hampton County, because they are going to expand on jobs and those economic opportunity zones. And these programs, agricultural education has been a program I've been talking about in the community for years now, because I actually taught at Whale Branch Early College High School, and I was trying to get them and get the administration and get everybody on board towards pushing, hey, we need agricultural education here. We've got a great program at Clemson University that we can build off of. It's one of the best and most renowned programs in the whole country when we talk about agricultural education, and we really need to value these things. And I'm glad that we saw some of those things come to fruition today out in Hampton County. But we need to keep that up, and we need that for Jasper County, and we need that in a lot of counties that are struggling right now, and could be able to build some of this for the future. So when we talk about the students and the teachers, I just think I have a unique perspective that I think can be built upon if I'm allowed to be in there, because then you've got a few retired teachers in there that are able to give their perspective, but nobody that's currently in the game. And it really has changed since I got in it 13 years ago. I just started year 13 on Monday. And again, guys, the evolution of where we're going in education and how fast that's changing is something that, again, I'm very patient about, because this is new to teachers. And so these first few weeks of school are going to be very chaotic, but I feel like they're going to calm down very quickly. And again, hopefully we're going to see some healthcare decisions and some of the things like that are reducing numbers. So we're able to kind of get a push back towards face-to-face education, because again, I'm a school teacher that wants to be in the building face-to-face with my students. I think that they get more out of that than sitting behind a computer. We are going to try some of this new virtual technology. Please be patient with your teachers on that. It is an evolving process. So again, I think that education can be our driving and motivating factor. I think it is the most important piece of legislation we will deal with after anything COVID and healthcare related. But I think that it is a must for our next session, because again, I don't see them getting around to any of this education stuff. And that was surprising to me, because I figured they would just pass it and try to say, look, we gave you everything you wanted right before the election, because then that would have gave them leverage with a lot of voters. But they seem to be standing pat on, they don't believe that the state Senate and the way it is, they think that they're going to win again. The Republican side does. So hopefully that'll give us an opening where we can get in there and negotiate, because again, I think that getting a good piece of legislation through both houses is a good bipartisan step that we haven't had to go through before. So if we elect somebody like me, and we elect some of these districts out of Charleston, I really think that we're going to be able to flip these ideas and be able to fix some of the biggest problems in public education.
Yeah, I think we're all going to have our eyes on the General Assembly this year in terms of education, for sure. If you are just joining us, we are live on Facebook with Nathan Campbell and Richard Hricik. Both of these gentlemen are running for South Carolina Senate. Nathan, you're District 46. Richard is District 43. Do I have that correct, Richard?
Yes, you do. District 43.
Perfect. Right. So if you are watching us, go ahead and start a watch party and share this with your friends, so you can share the messages of our candidates with people that you know. Richard, why don't you talk to us about your ideas about education? I know you've done a lot of work with this in the past. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Jody, thanks for having me. You know, my district doesn't actually touch Bluffton, but I wanted to because the area, you know, the district extends all the way down to Beaufort, St. Helena, all the way around to Port Royal. And I know there's a lot of folks that overlap. But I want to introduce myself, say hello. My name is Hricik. I'm your Democratic candidate for South Carolina Senate District 43. And what I want you to do is I want you to believe in better. For too long, South Carolina has been ranked in the bottom of the things that we should be ranked in the top of. We keep repeating and doing the same thing. We keep sending the same career politicians to Columbia over and over again. And as I tell you, nothing changes if nothing changes. If we want to change South Carolina, we have to change the people who are making policy. And that means we have to do something different. You know, when it comes to education, Jody, I want to tell you a little story of my family. And I tell the people out there the story of my family. You know, the story of my family, the story of my success begins, you know, in Ellis Island. My grandparents, as you can tell from my last name, were Ellis Island immigrants. My father was born to them. At 6 years old, the Depression hit them. And at 6 years old, he didn't speak English. And he was stealing coal off a coal pile of a steel mill in Lorain, Ohio, so his family had heat. He ultimately went through public school. He served our country in the Air Force. He got himself a little bit of education, and we had a middle-class life. My parents got a divorce, and we fell backward. But still, public schools were there for me. And what my family, you know, growing up in a big family and growing up in a second-generation American family was, you were taught if you get yourself an education and work hard, anything is possible in this country. And it is a story of hope, and it is the story of dreams. Jody, you have young children, and the first day you send them off to school, you know, you send them off to school with a dream. You dream that they're going to have a different and better life, that they're going to have whatever opportunity they have is in front of them. And that's the same every parent has. And Nathan sees them when he teaches those kids in the classroom. He knows that behind every child sitting in that room, there's a parent that's saying, I hope my child has better. And that is the promise of America, and that is the promise of public schools. But too long, South Carolina has failed that promise. And our current legislatures, they've broken that promise. You know, the Supreme Court, not that long ago, issued an opinion in the Abbeville court decision that said that the current legislatures, the General Assembly, and the governor had so failed our children that they had failed to provide a minimally adequate education. The constitutional obligation of the state that it owes its children, that it had failed to provide a minimally adequate education. Let that sink in. That's a moral failing. That's saying to a group of children, we will not do the least just to ensure that you have the minimum. And so where you change public education is twofold. Number one, you have to have people who are authentic advocates. And you heard from Nathan and you heard from me. That's in my DNA. You know, I'm a public school kid. I went through public schools. I did my undergraduate degree at night. I worked full-time during the day. I worked every job there is. I've been working since I was 13 years old, so you name it. I've washed dishes in a restaurant. I've fixed cars. I've painted houses. I've driven a forklift. You name the job, whatever I needed to do, I did. And going through college, I worked in a bank as a teller. I worked as a bookkeeper. I did those things because that's what it needed to do to get the degree. And then ultimately I borrowed the money and I went to law school and I went to William and Mary. And how blessed and fortunate that I am that enabled me to have the kind of success that I have today. You know, I tell that story. And in one generation, we went from my father on a coal pile to me sitting here in a law firm that has my name on the door. And I want that story not to be extraordinary, but to be ordinary. And that for that to be an ordinary story, we need to change. And so here's the perspective. Let me tell you this. You know what you've never heard in South Carolina? You've never heard in the entire time people said, you know, in 10 years, South Carolina is going to be #1 in public education. We are going to lead the nation. We are going to have a goal. We are all going to work for it. We're going to get a buy-in from the business community. We are going to get a buy-in across the board, and we are going to change the trajectory of this state. Instead, we're content if we move from 48th to 46th and we act like we celebrated something. That's a moral failing. That's a failing of people who are not committed to public education or so changing the trajectory of it. You know, my commitment to education and public education extends down to early education and its critical component. You know, one of the things I've worked very hard on is public Montessori. I've been involved with a public Montessori school here in Mount Pleasant in Charleston for the better part of 13 years. I have volunteered my time. I have served on the board. I have been the board chair. I have served as the school's counsel. And I've done those things because I believe in the science of learning, and I believe in the backbone of what Maria Montessori taught. And that was this. For those of you who don't know, Maria Montessori got her start teaching in the streets of Italy. And it's a powerful story because what she did is she taught the orphans, she taught the gypsies, she taught the abandoned children. And she said, every child can be reached. And those methods are what are the Montessori methods that enable so many children. And for too long, the Montessori method, that science-based teaching, that pre-K teaching that has given children such amazing foundations, were generally only private, generally very expensive. My goal in doing this was to help bring to the public the idea that we need early education. So when you talk about platforms of change, they're very simple. Number one, we need universal pre-K. All of the data and science says it's so. The single greatest accurate predictor of a child's future success is how kindergarten ready they are when they come in the door. Number two, we have to pay and retain talent. You know, I'm a business guy. I'm an entrepreneur. I run my own business. You know, every business says, you know, what's the key to a business? Talent. Right now, I think the last time I looked on SE for Ed, there are 1,100, and Nathan, you could correct me, 1,100 teacher openings in South Carolina, give or take, last I looked. Well, guess what? You know, we believe in the economic model of paying and rewarding talent in the business world, but somehow the state, when it comes to our teachers, doesn't recognize that same model. So if you're a great teacher and you want to do more and you want to be a better teacher, we're not going to pay and reward you. And that's terrible. And last, we're going to make sure we need to keep kids safe. And when you have people who are inauthentic and keep pushing it down, they're kicking, everything has kicked the can down the road. And this comes back to an authenticity about leadership. They want to get children back in the classroom, but nobody's addressed COVID in the first place. If we don't, all of these things are interconnected. We're not going to change things economically. We're not going to stabilize things. Things aren't going to go back to normal till we address the virus. And so all of these things that lead you with an education, I want every child to have an opportunity, because here's what I will tell you. Our children cannot compete in the economy of the future from a broken system of the past. They cannot compete from a modem or a Wi-Fi bus or a teacher handing them mimeographed sheets. That is dooming them. And the gap only widens. We're going to emerge from this pandemic, and it's going to take authentic people with vision and a future to lead us forward, not the same old politicians who only know how to do what it is their way.
Yeah. You guys are speaking my language. I don't know if you know this, Richard. My girls actually attend a public Montessori here in Beaufort County that was modeled after the programs in Charleston. So
see, it spreads. It's where you plant the seed.
Yeah,
that's and now the program here in Charleston is allowing early education. We're getting kids in early, and you know, if we can expand that pre-K, but it thrills me. And I'm not saying it's the only solution, but it's the toehold. It's the first step.
Exactly. So we're going to pivot now. We're going to go to a new topic of equality. You know, this has definitely been a tumultuous summer. There's been a lot of civil unrest. So this is a topic that's really important to a lot of people, and it's one that sort of, you know, touches on a lot of different areas. So I don't know. Nathan, why don't you go give Richard a rest, or do you want? Yes. Richard, are you ready? Who's ready? Richard's on mute.
Sorry.
Do you need a break, or you want Nathan to take it?
Well, all right, I'll go.
All right.
All right. Here, you know, I was just dominating the conversation there for the last 7 minutes or whatever my time was. So somebody yell at me. I want to make sure I'm not going over. But here's where I begin. And you talk about issues of equality. And, you know, we change from an uplifting, positive message where I'm talking about believing better. And you know what? That message is the same. Because if we truly want to move forward together, it takes people, leaders who have an authentic heart, who have an authentic conscience, who believe in that fundamentally, that that's what it will take to move us forward. You know, this question is so broad and touches on so many issues, on everything from, and I would come back to your first question, which is on on education. We need to begin to address the fact that if we must give every child a chance at the starting line. There's the essence of equality, is giving every child a chance right from the beginning in public school, because you know what? A system that only rewards and gives scholarships that the state supports for children who have graduated high school and is going to college has misspent its resources. Because if we don't prepare the children when they come in the door, that's not going to change. But I'll also say this on equality across the board. Where you stand, what leaders do is they take people to places they didn't know they could go. They appeal to their better angels. They drive public will to where they are and they lead them forward. They do not cling to the past or pine for days ago. But if we are going to move forward as a state, as a place, you are seeing an awakening. And you have to ask yourself with people, where have you stood and where are we now? You know, I'll tell you two stories about me because I think the issues of equality are so profound. It was about 7 years ago, I was asked when I was county party chair to speak at something called the Eve of Equality. This was a rally in favor of marriage equality. And I am very proud to be the first person associated with any political party as a political party leader to speak in favor of marriage equality almost 2 years before the Supreme Court ever ruled. That's what leaders do. That's where I stood, and that's where I stood then. And I appealed to everyone on the steps of the Customs House, and I said, these are human rights, that there's nothing that needs to be, there's nothing constitutional about denying people the right to marry. Now, my opponent, his view of equality is very different. He's a 22-year career politician. He brought to South Carolina the sex education bill where students, the only thing that could be taught to them about homosexuality was the fact that homosexuality was illegal. He has been antagonistic towards issues of LGBT equality during his entire time in the House, during his entire time in the Senate. That's a difference. Issues of equality, I'll say this. I have been a vocal supporter of many, many issues here in the Low Country for many, many years. And one of the things, again, I'm most proud of is about two or 3 years ago, I was asked by some friends to stand with others down on Spring Street and call for the removal of the Calhoun statue. Now, at that time, I can tell you there were roughly 10 people there and it barely made the news. But I stood there then because I saw what it was. And it is those vestiges that keep us from moving forward. My opponent thinks the Confederate flag is not offensive. He was silent following the killing of George Floyd. He has supported the Heritage Act. Those aren't ideas and values that will move us forward, both as a state, as a people. We must have authentic voices who believe that it is as equality that we can and should move forward. Lastly, I will tell you this. There's so many issues this touches upon. The authenticity of where we are. I was a criminal justice professor. I worked for the Department of Justice. And when the killing of George Floyd occurred, I issued a statement and said very specifically about some of the things that should be done. And law enforcement at times has a very difficult job. But you know what? South Carolina has done a series of half measures. And there's so many things that can be done. And just very simply, if we're going to have body cameras, make sure they're turned on and that everybody has them. That's just very simple. That keeps everybody safe. That's not choosing sides. That says, and the body cameras are on, we know exactly what has happened. The other part that I will tell you is we have disconnected our police officers from our communities. You know, they used to be members of the community, but in many ways, so many of these issues are intertwined that we have lost the connection of serving the community that is the part of what it means to perform police functions. You know, my goal for South Carolina is very simple. I believe every single one of us has inherent value. That the promise of equality that we recite in the pledge, and it says unequivocally that we pledge our loyalty to each other as Americans. And I want us all to succeed and move forward together. And so when I tell you believe in better, that is the better that's coming, South Carolina. That is the better that's coming.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. Nathan, how about you? I mean, well, first I should just clue everybody in. If we have people who are just joining us, we're doing a town hall tonight with Richard running for South Carolina Senate. Am I muted? Can you hear me?
You're good. You're good.
Okay,
No, you're good.
I got a little message that said the host muted me, and I didn't think that was true. Richard Hricik, who's running for South Carolina State Senate District 43, and then also Nathan Campbell running for South Carolina District 46. So we're talking about the subject of equality. Nathan, I know you have some unique experiences that give you insight into this issue, so why don't you share with us?
So originally growing up in West Virginia, very narrow scope of just the ideas of what equality was. I enjoyed being somebody who my parents stressed, obviously very stressed equality, stressed the idea that I was from West Virginia and I needed to know what that represented, because we were the only state to secede from the Union, or to secede and start our own state in 1863, based upon the idea that we thought we were a 95% white state, and we thought that the idea of slavery was an abomination, and so we took the natural resources and left Virginia. And when I moved to South Carolina, I saw what was changing. Those ideas, because over the last 13 years, we've seen those things that, you know, people like Richard in Charleston have fought for. And we've seen some of those things happen in the last few years, but we've actually seen a lot in Bluffton in the past 2 years. A lot of organization, a lot of people standing up and saying, hey, these are things that are going on in our local communities that haven't been said before, and starting the conversations that need to happen. And I think, again, being a school teacher and having to, and teaching government and having questions come to me that I have to give them a very non-political answer. And that actually has sparked a lot of unique research techniques by them. They want to know the answer, because you're going to see a lot of this. They're not agreeing with their parents or grandparents. And when I was a kid, again, I'll be full, tell you guys full out, I picked my political party at the age of 18 based upon, what were you, mom? What were you, dad? Oh, you're Republicans? Then I must be. And didn't even know anything until I went to college and still started studying things. And so when I think of equality, when I moved down here, I saw what I thought was going to be moving from West Virginia, which I thought our schools were severely underfunded. And then I moved into quote unquote, the corridor of shame, which is what I was told it was called when I moved there. Not during the interview process, of course. But one of the things that I noticed there was this funding disparity. And so when we talk about equality, we're not going to be able to have some of these conversations if we don't get education fixed. And to go in there and repeal Act 388 and put something else in place, these are concrete things that I've been talking about that will be real solutions. And so, again, education is going to be how we're going to do this. We're going to be able to recruit and retain teachers if we talk to teachers, because teachers right now have a lot of debt and they're not able to build wealth. So those are the type of things that we need to attack with programs specifically for teachers, because of some of the failings of the federal government. And I think now is the time to act on that. I am the first person in our district, in Senate District 46, to ever be endorsed by South Carolina Equality. That to me is an honor, but it's alarming that this organization's been around since 2011. They had a chance to endorse somebody in 2012. They had somebody to endorse in 2016. They chose not to do that. And that should tell our voters something, that something's up. And of course, we see a lot of traction right now towards a lot of our people supporting a hate crimes law. The guy I'm running against is saying, hey, I'm going to support a hate crimes law, but you're supporting it now. Where were you 12 years ago when you went in there? Where were you 18 years ago when you were the chief of staff for the governor? If these things were really important to you, wouldn't you have fixed them then? I think a lot of that starts with that hate crimes law. Yeah, obviously that'd be the first thing, and one of the first things that a Senate led by people like Richard and behind people like Marlon Kempson, we're going to get something passed almost immediately when it comes to a hate crimes law. But those tough conversations need to happen, so you can't stop there. And if you ask a lot of our opponents, that's where they want to stop. They don't want to have the tough conversations that repealing the Heritage Act would have. They don't want to talk about DACA recipients and just allowing them to have their professional degrees that they deserve. And again, we can go down the criminal justice route and talk about those things because I want to talk about those things. Those are the things that haven't been talked about because it's been so partisan. And if you are able to elect a Democratic state Senate this year, then everything has to be worked through bipartisanly. And I've already talked to quite a few people on both sides of the aisle about community policing grants that we can hand out to these local communities to allow more interaction, like Richard was saying, more interaction between the police and the actual people that they serve. Because again, we want those types of interactions. We need these tough conversations to happen. We need that type of stuff. So I'm excited to kind of go in there and be a voice. Because again, we do not have voices in the state legislature right now that are able to gain support because of the way that it's worked out politically. So if we want to be able to talk, and again, I think Beaufort County should lead on things like this. I think we should lead on things like education, not be led by Horry County. I think we should lead on things like equality and not be led by career politicians. Because again, if you're corporate funded and you're a career politician, what is it to give advantages to people that are wanting change and needing change? So again, I'm very, very proud to be endorsed by South Carolina Equality. I didn't expect that these type of endorsements would come. I'm very proud of that because I feel that that is something that I'm in the race for. I'm trying to speak up for the people that in our community have been taken advantage of for years. That's why a main tenet of mine, and the last thing I'm going to say, is changing some of these things when we talk about the way the government works and getting rid of gerrymandering, because we can see in our district right now, and we can see in the town and county council lines, how they're drawing lines right through minority neighborhoods in order to weaken the voting power of minorities. And if we don't talk about that, then it's just going to be what they do this year when they draw the lines. This is the redistricting year. This is why this election is this important to South Carolinians. If you want the politicians to draw their lines and take your power away, feel free to elect the career politicians you have always elected. But if you want people to actually give you back the power and give citizens the power to draw the lines, then again, support people like me and Richard, because we're actually going to get independent redistricting committees in there that actually get us to get the legislator away from drawing the lines and get regular, ordinary, everyday citizens in there to say, okay, these are communities. We shouldn't be splitting these things in half in order to weaken power. So again, trying to get rid of some of that voter suppression. Great news today that COVID is going to be a reason that we are allowed to absentee vote. So that is some of the state legislature had to go in and give us that one, because again, it worked glaringly well for the primaries. So I'm glad that they've at least tried to not fight that bit of voter suppression that is going to happen across the country. So again, I think that equality and speaking up for equality and then going in with an action plan is just as important as talking about it. And so if your politicians are talking about it now, but they haven't talked about it for the last 18 years, It might be because they have challengers like me and Richard that are ready to have those tough conversations.
It's a good point. And you make a really good point about gerrymandering. And I know that you've done a lot of research into that. And even when you worked, in the State House up in West Virginia, you studied that issue. And people, if you want to know a little bit more about gerrymandering and how the congressional district lines and the other district lines are drawn. You can learn more about that too from the League of Women Voters. They follow that issue very, very closely. So we have one more topic tonight to discuss. We've got Richard Hricik running for South Carolina State Senate District 46, Nathan Campbell, South Carolina Senate District, Richard's 43, Nathan's District 46. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
You're good.
We have one more topic tonight, and this is another big one too, the environment. And I feel like, in the age of COVID, like environment has gotten pushed to the back burner, but this is another one that touches everything, from national security to the economy. So we kind of did Nathan, Richard, Nathan. Do you want to take that one up first, Nathan? Why don't you
Sure. Yeah,
environment, and we'll go to Richard to close that out.
Yeah. So the environment is something that, again, I've valued the environment. I grew up physically on the Ohio River in a small town called Sistersville. It was named because the guy had sisters and didn't want to pick between them. So he went with Sistersville. And I grew up every day respecting the environment. But as I grew older, I realized that the environment that I respected wasn't being respected by people up the river. And so when I would go on trips up the river, I would see chemical plants dumping things. And then you'd always get the rare occurrence of somebody catching the three-eyed fish or the mutated whatever. And so it really kind of, it was really a labor of love when I got to, leave the mountains and come to the coast and see an area that took environmental protection a lot more seriously, talking about the people. The people here really care about the environment, and that goes all the way from Myrtle Beach to Charleston and down here to Hilton Head, and especially Beaufort and Bluffton. So when we talk about our environment and our local environment, we've seen what happens if you elect career politicians that only listen to the real estate lobby and only get paid by construction companies, because you're going to see what that typically happens in Bluffton. Bluffton 10 years ago, we had a very low fecal coliform bacteria in the May River. Now, as of December, that has increased 3,150%. We are seeing that it will damage industries in shrimp and oysters, where we've had people working in those industries for years. That to me is ridiculous, but it's showing that this is what happens when you say you're for the environment, but you're not really for it. I call my environmental policies proactive environmental protection. What we've got from our career politicians is reactive. They decide, hey, when something bad happens, they'll come out and say, look at how much money we got to fix the problem. But they don't do anything to fix the problem in the first place. We see that perfectly if you look at the Okatee trash fire and Mount Trashmore, right? All of these construction sites, they take the waste down there, they put it, it creates methane, it catches fire. The fire that happened in 2019 was not something that miraculously happened. It had happened before. It's just this fire they couldn't put out, and they needed DHEC to come in and do it. My kind of environmental protection is not sending a mailer to your house that says I cleaned up the environment after it happened and after that trash fire caught on fire for 2 months. It's not like that fire was a day or 2 days. It lasted 2 months. And we had kids in Okatee that couldn't go outside for elementary because of the air quality. So if you think that environmental protection is not important to somebody like me, I have got news for you. I want to go in there and actually work with the environmental groups that are supporting my opponent. They didn't even contact me because my opponent is for solar panels, not renewable energy as a whole, just the solar panel industry. Because if you look at campaign donations, you will see why these people are for this. Career politicians get money from companies. And he, my opponent, happens to get in the last year and a half around $10,000 from solar panel companies. That's not protecting the environment proactively. That's saying, ooh, if I'm a Republican and I come out for this, I'm going to get support and money from renewable energy. So that's using the industry to get reelected. That is the type of career politician move that these people in this state use year after year to garner your vote on election year. You won't hear anything about the environment for the next 3 years out of career politicians until it's election year. And so again, I want to be out there proactively in protecting the environment, working with some of these groups that, again, don't support me now, but they will once they see, hey, this guy is a lot farther when in forward thinking, not backwards thinking. I am forward thinking. I want to protect things because we know how important the tourism industry is here. We know locally how important the shrimp and oyster industry is here. And we want to protect jobs and make sure that we can still develop. So when I talk, I'm going to always talk environmentally about smart growth and thought out growth. And I see that right now we see what's happened after you have 12 years of people that do not think those things out. And so again, I want to be somebody that protects our environment and make sure that we're able to provide renewable energy sources and make sure that we're able to expand those energy resources. I want to make sure that we give tax breaks to the people that need them to get this renewable energy on top of their house, or what we need to get it in their home. So then we are the number one, kind of like Richard said with education. Why are we not the number one producer of renewable energy? That is something within the next 10 years, if you're electing forward thinking people like Richard and I, you're going to see that some of those things come a lot easier.
Yes. Richard, did you want to piggyback on what Nathan was saying? I'm sure you have a couple of policy ideas.
Sure. Well, there's
on the topic.
Well, there's some things there, and what Nathan hit upon was exactly the point, and that is, my district, as you can see from my background, is the most environmentally fragile district in all of South Carolina. Some refer to the district as the Venice of the United States. We are the most susceptible and subject to sea level rise. You don't have to tell anyone in the Low Country. Charleston flooded a record 89 times last year. We have these what they call now, has a term. It's referred to as nuisance flooding. The floodwaters are rising and they haven't been addressed. And what Nathan is referring to is an absence of leadership, as I was saying, on issues of education. 2018 was the very first time that South Carolina engaged in a statewide floodwater commission report. Let that sink in. We are a coastal state, and it was the first time ever there was a comprehensive look at flooding. And here's the punchline: that once again ignored science. And if you don't have authentic people who believe in science, making decisions about science and making decisions about the environment, nothing changes if nothing changes. You keep sending the same people who don't believe in science, you're going to keep getting the same result. So let me give you a different way to look at so many of the issues that we're talking about. Number one, the failures of leadership and being reactive. Now we are starting to try to address the issue of flooding for the very first time. Now the sea level rise is an issue. Hunting Island down in Beaufort. We've seen the effects, and what we have seen is an effects of the erosion of the Beachfront Protection Act. The Beachfront, I forget the exact name, Waterfront Act. Not exactly sure how it's stated. But what it is here's what I would tell you. South Carolina has no goals. We just passed our first solar panel, our first solar bill, and we act like we've accomplished something. You know what? Take a look at what other states have done. We're so far behind the curve. We celebrate when we should be leading. We are behind when we should be leading. So what do? You establish goals. You don't get to places without goals because we are so environmentally fragile. I have proposed that South Carolina, and this has been on my website since I've started, that South Carolina have a target of being carbon neutral by 2050. Why? Because once you establish a goal, like anything else, you get buy-in from the business communities, you get public-private partnerships, you have a motivation and incentive. Further, we should have all South Carolina governments off carbon by 2050. The governments themselves should be off carbon. That could be easily attainable. That will spur further economic growth and will spur industry. We have these opportunities and we had these opportunities. And you know what? Let me give you, just roll back time just a little bit. In 2008, when President Obama was passing these series of incentives to create, we had to slow down the economy. The idea was to build resiliency into our economies, to allow state and local governments through grants, through how they would change their building codes to create green energy, to incentivize resiliency in all residential and commercial development, to make them more energy efficient. And in South Carolina, carbon reduction or carbon free appears one time in our South Carolina code. Let me read it to you. Ensure that any future energy strategy that promotes carbon free, non-greenhouse gas emitting sources, wait for the punchline, includes nuclear energy. How did that work out for us, folks? Everybody within the sound, everybody who's out here in South Carolina knows exactly how this would work out. This is why we've had the VC summer debacle. If we had taken that money and invested in clean technology, if we had given these block grants back to our coastal communities in the low country, we could have addressed these issues. Further, Nathan hit upon it, Mount Trashmore. Again, we have DHEC as an underfunded agency. It pays lip service to many of the environmental regulations. I'll give you another one. We have had terrible problems with the plastic nurdle pollution here in Charleston. These little plastic pellets are washing up on our beach. DHEC has said it's not within their jurisdiction. It's taken local advocacy groups to go to court to try to address them. Again, more failures of leadership. What I will tell you is this, is that there isn't a more pressing issue to where we live in our sense of place. The flood waters are rising. They are not slowing down. Everyone who lives here knows and sees it. They see it in the streets. They see it when it's on the news. They see it down on Market Street. They feel it in their feet. We need people who are authentic voices in the low country to speak on the issue of the climate crisis. My opponent has been entirely absent, has never said one word on this in his entire 26 years. That's appalling. For a place that is the low country, that is this susceptible, to never address it. And further, to never be 100% opposed to all offshore drilling at all times. To say no completely to dirty energy, but to take this nuanced approach of offshore infrastructure and not too close to South Carolina and whatever. We need people who are authentic voices. We need defenders, not pretenders. I will be an authentic voice for our environment, for its defense, because the same people who have gotten us to this point have offered us very little in the way of solutions or goals. I want to be ensured that, Jodie, your daughters and my daughters get to enjoy this beautiful sense of place that is the low country, that is our beaches, that make us who we are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you really hit home the message that environmental issues are economic issues. A lot of the time, people will talk about environmental issues and frame it that it's too expensive or, it's bad for industry. But the truth of it is if we don't handle the environmental crisis, we're also going to have an economic crisis on our hands as well. So that was it for the topics that we had. We are in a Zoom with the Bluffton Democratic Club members. So we're getting a couple of questions. We have about 10 minutes left. So if you fellows want to take, a minute or two for each one. One of the first questions we have is, it's an education question, since you're both so well versed in that. It is a national issue, but I think it's just curious to get your opinion. They wanted to know who would you like to see replace Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education should Joe Biden be elected this November?
I'm going to take this one because this is easy, Nathan. I'm going to jump in. My opponent's a supporter of Betsy DeVos. Everyone hear that? Publicly on the record that he is a supporter of Betsy DeVos. I can think of no one who is a less authentic champion of public education. I can think of no one whose policies are more opposite to improving publication and moving us forward. Her extreme radical agenda that she began with of a $5 billion transfer of funds away from public education to private education is appalling. Her statements since have shown she does not know the first thing about public education and that she has no business being in the position. We need people who are authentic advocates of public education who want to move not only our state, but our country forward as we move into a knowledge-based economy of tomorrow. That is not the voice.
Yeah, when it comes to Betsy, to replace her, I think Richard and I probably both agree on the person, but we will never see that person because I know Richard and I have both talked to Dr. Jill Biden about education. So we've actually met with her. So I'm pretty sure that would be an awesome one to have. But if we can't have her, how about Elizabeth Warren, who has an idea because she's been in a classroom before? Because if you do remember, Joe Biden did say he's going to stick a classroom teacher. And, you know, again, I hope I want to win this race, so I'm not available, but I'll take it. You know, if this doesn't work out, you know, I'll take, the Secretary of Education, you know, that can be a fallback plan. So, but yeah, my opponent, he writes right out of the book of Betsy DeVos. So he actually was in Charleston recently when she was, and yeah, we've got some similar school choice ideas there, which I like to say that that's the resegregation of public schools. So when you hear school choice, and you're going to hear that come up in debates with me and my opponent here in the next few weeks, because I'm going to make it an issue, because again, we don't need somebody in there that's going to drain money out of that public system. We need somebody that's going to make sure that we're fully funding, not minimally adequately funding education. So
yeah, and well, and sometimes this conversation will be framed as school choice. That is a rhetorical flourish. You know, when people reference that, they're not necessarily talking about public education. They're talking about funneling public dollars to private institutions. Hot button for me. Sorry. I'm seeing a couple other questions. I think we have time for like one more. And so one of the other folks on our Zoom call had a quick question about, you know, if you could give a little bit of information about your stance on low income housing. Sometimes we call that affordable or attainable housing, what things can be done at the state level for that. And then before we all go, I'll just say a couple of things about absentee voting and when that's opening and everything. And then there's also a Joe Cunningham event virtual on his page at 7. So, but anyway, Richard, go ahead and tell us a little bit about affordable housing.
Well, I just want to say first of all, because we're going to be wrapping up, and I don't know how much, you know, we got a few minutes. I just wanted to say thank you to the Bluffton Club for having me. Thank you all. You know, one of the things I always say is that the most valuable thing you give anyone is your time, and all of you showing up are giving of your time, and I thank you for that, and I'm honored by that. And if we're going to move South Carolina forward on all these issues, including things like workforce housing, then you know it's going to take authentic voices. Again, these things all point to absences of leadership. We have had such an absence of leadership on so many levels. The problem being particularly exacerbated here in the Charleston area, and it's now extending down into the Beaufort area as well. You know, all I could say is in a short period of time, it's to give a long answer. There needs to be a lot of work with some public-private partnerships. A lot of this can be addressed and done on city levels, these are county levels. The state can certainly make financing vehicles available, but to address the issue of workforce housing, I'll give you one example here. For example, in Mount Pleasant, something like, and I can't remember the number, almost 70% of first responders don't live in Mount Pleasant. So therefore, if the bridges were shut down for a hurricane, they have to be basically put up in the schools so that they can be here to serve their communities. So this is a particular problem. I don't know if you're going to come back for a wrap up, but I just wanted to say this. Thank you again all very much. And you know what? Nothing changes applies to you too. If you want to be a part of this, if you want to be a part of moving South Carolina forward, if you believe, you know what? We're not going analog, we're going digital. We're not going backwards, we're moving forward. If you want tomorrow to be better, if you believe nothing changes, if nothing changes, then that means you got to do something about it. Richard, FORSC, it's there on my background. I want to lead us forward. And you know what? I want to lead us forward in a positive way. I have a wonderfully positive message. Together, we can move South Carolina. South Carolina can be a leader in everything. We do not have to hold our heads in shame and talk about being 48th in education. We should be leading the nation in many things that we are in the bottom of. It's time for new citizen leaders, and the same people who got us here, who couldn't manage the good times, aren't going to lead us out of a COVID pandemic. Richard for SC.com. Thank you all so much for having me.
My turn, right? So affordable housing. So obviously I would like to see funding vehicles and incentivize people in Beaufort County to do it. We've seen in the Bluffton area, they've been talking about this ever since I moved here. And so now we see a little bit more traction with some of our current members being a little bit more forward thinking. So again, I really hope that we're able to do something as a funding and as to incentivize people in cities and counties to, again, get this housing in there so we can actually, build a more well-rounded society with very diverse people. And so, but to end it, I really appreciate the Bluffton Democratic Club for allowing us to do this. I really appreciate Richard for being able to spend some time with us as well. But we can't stop. We have to make sure that we're out there making phone calls, that we're contacting our friends. In the past week, I have registered around 20 people to vote just on my cell phone and going, hey, fill out your stuff right here, press send, right? Because I want this done. I want people to participate. I want the biggest turnout we've ever had for our candidates up and down the ballot, because I think you're going to see, like that hasn't been mentioned tonight, Jodie is running for County Council, District 7. She is an excellent she is the only candidate in the race, in my opinion. There is another person, but you actually have to do things to earn votes, not just come up with slogans. So I am very proud of the work that she's doing. She's going to be a great asset to our county council. We see the current makeup, and again, I really am excited for some of our local candidates. I'm excited for our state Senate candidates all over the state. I think we're going to do something great this year that's going to be something that people recognize when they see Jamie Harrison in the U.S. Senate, they see Joe Cunningham in the House, and they see a blue state Senate for the first time in a long time. You're going to see a lot of things move forward and not move back. We are done with career politicians. If Donald Trump taught us one thing, again, you can be part of that swamp and not be a career politician, but we need real people that actually know how to do it. And so I am very proud to be, I'm very proud to and again, very emotional, because my name gets to appear on a ballot with people like Joe Biden, with people like Jamie Harrison, with people like Joe Cunningham. So for me, it's a real thrill to get out there and do some good things for good people. So yes, Campbell 4SC, the number 4SC, feel free to contact us. I give out my cell phone number pretty readily, so feel free to contact us. We've got yard signs. They came in today. Come and pick them up. We'll be at the Bluffton Democratic Club, I think, this weekend. Kathleen, is that? Yep. So we'll be doing that on Saturday and handing out some yard signs. So hopefully I'll see a lot of you there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nathan. We also didn't mention we have on the call tonight Mitch Segal, who's running for House District 118. And then we have also candidates in Beaufort County, Chris DeVries, who she's running for House District 123. So that's in the southern area of Hilton Head Island and Defusky Island. And then also Barbara Nash in Beaufort area running for House District 124. So lots of candidates this go round. So I won't take up any more time. It's 2 minutes after 7. I want to thank everybody, for watching, and just echo what Richard and Nathan said. Please, it's very hard in these forums to give a lot of details. So please go to their websites and read what they have there and their issues, and inform yourselves. Also, Vote 411 is a great resource. Vote411.org, offered by the League of Women Voters as well. So that's all for us tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, everyone.